Hi there, how are you? Everybody knows. All the old faces. Yeah, I must have ticked off that many people, John. Oh,
No, you're supposed to look at wireless.
We're ready. Okay. Good evening. I'm calling to order the regular meeting of the CUSD 303 School Board on Monday, March 14th at 5:32 p.m. Ms. Marcian, the roll, please.
Yes, Mrs. Bell,
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Here.
Mr. Kuchard,
Here.
Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
and Mrs. Barker.
Here. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have citizen comments this evening. Mrs. McCabe, would you please read our policy? Oh, I apologize. Don't do that yet. We have a superintendent's report first. Sorry, Dr. Pearson.
That's okay. Thank you so much. We want to make sure we have an opportunity tonight to do some celebrations and recognitions. So I appreciate the time. To begin with, we're going to start with wrestling. And so I'm going to ask Coach Potter to come up and introduce a couple of athletes to you.
First off, thank you for having us. We really appreciate you honoring these two fine young men. With me tonight is Tyler Guerra. He's a sophomore. He took third this year in the IHSA state tournament, 132 pounds. So this is Tyler. And also with us is Ben Davino, who won the state title at 120 pounds. It's actually his second state title. So he's also a sophomore and a two-time state champ.
Wow.
Mrs. Barker has some certificates that she would like to present on behalf of the board. Great. And then Ms. Smith wants to get a quick photo. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming this evening. Congratulations. We're also happy tonight to recognize 4 National Merit finalists, 2 from East High School and 2 from North. We're going to have them come up individually so they can introduce a couple of people that they brought with them and then also share a little bit about their plans after high school. So first we have Zachary Chiat. Zachary, if you want to come up.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. You want to introduce who you brought with you tonight?
Of course, this is my mother, Katie Chiat. She's awesome. And yeah.
And yeah, just tell us a little bit about, first of all, you're a senior at East High School and what are you planning to do when after you graduate?
So I'm going to attend Brown University. I'm going to be studying philosophy and I intend to be an attorney.
Excellent. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Ms. Barker has a certificate for you. And we're going to get a quick photo. All right. Thank you. Congratulations. Our next National Merit finalist is Alyssa Shimenti. Alyssa, if you want to come up. Looks like she's bringing some folks along with her as well. Introduce who you brought with you.
I brought my parents, Jim and Angie. And next year I'm planning on going to Mizzou and I'm thinking about either going into computer science or food science.
All right. Well, congratulations. Ms. Barker has a certificate for you. And then if we can get a quick photo. Great. Congratulations. Our next National Merit finalist is Jack Barton from North High School. Jack, come on up. All right. Jack, why don't you introduce who you brought with you tonight?
I brought my parents, Scott and Barton.
Great. And do you have any ideas about what you want to do after you graduate?
Yeah, I'm hoping to attend university. I don't know where yet. I'm still waiting on acceptances, but I'm hoping to study either physics or neuroscience.
Physics or neuroscience. Great. Well, congratulations on being selected as a National Merit finalist, and Mrs. Barker has a certificate for you. All right, and one final National Merit finalist from North High School, Justin Hughes. Justin, if you want to come up. Justin, go ahead and introduce who you brought with you.
Well, first off, thank you guys for your time tonight. And this is my dad, Jeremy, my mom, Audrey.
And what about after high school? Have you thought about what you're doing next?
Yeah, so I plan on majoring in business, and I've applied to a few schools in the SEC, ACC, and Ivy League, but I'm not sure where I'm going yet.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. And Mrs. Barker has a certificate for you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Congratulations. And I just realized when we introduced our wrestlers, we forgot to introduce who they brought with them. So I don't know, guys, if you want to come back up and just introduce your parents real quickly so that we make sure we honor them as well tonight, be great.
It laughed. Okay, this is my mom, Kristen Penna, and then this is my dad, Marvin Guerra.
Great. Thank you. Congratulations again.
All right, this is my mom, Jennifer Davino. This is my dad, Mark Davino.
Congratulations. Thank you all for coming tonight to participate in our recognition time. And we just are so proud of your accomplishments as a district. And we hope to continue to hear about great things going forward. So thank you so much. You're all welcome to stay for the whole meeting if you'd like to, but you're also welcome to slip out if you would rather. So thanks again.
Okay, so is there anything else for the superintendent report this evening?
You know what? That was the best superintendent report of the year. And so I'm going to just stop right there.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Let's go ahead and read that citizens' comments policy.
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Okay, our first citizen is Elisa Ignash.
My name is Elisa Ignash. I'd like the school board to give direction to remove all COVID mitigation strategies from D303 immediately. We will never effectively pick off all current mitigation strategies one by one because there's no consistency to start with. In front of you is a chart of 6 D303 elementary schools and 1 high school. The chart outlines the lunch, indoor recess, PE, music, family night, and volunteer procedures currently in place at each of these schools. You will see within these schools, the policies change by grade and even by classrooms. Starting with lunch at Munn Hall, 2nd grader has assigned seating that has not changed all year, but 4th grader does not have assigned seating, however, must stay within assigned class tables. At Coron, kindergartner has assigned seating that has not changed all year, sits 3 to a table. Coron 2nd grader, also with assigned seating, but sits alone. At Bell Graham, 1st grader has assigned seating that has not changed all year. 4th grader has assigned seating that changes monthly. Fearson and Nordic Creek, not assigned, sit 3 to a table, must stay within assigned class tables. Wasco, assigned seats that change. St. Charles North, not assigned, no designated table restrictions. Indoor recess at Munn Hall, Coron, Fearson, and Wasco, students are free to move. At Bell Graham, a 2nd grader is free to move, but a 4th grader can only move if wearing a mask. At Norton Creek, 1st grader A's class can move freely, but 1st grader B's class must stay in desks. PE at Munhall is primarily in classrooms. Corn and Belgraham are in the cafeteria. Norton Creek, Fearson, Wasco, and St. Charles North are in gymnasiums. At Munhall, Coron, Norton Creek, Fearson, and Wasco, students sing in music class, but not allowed to perform for parents. At Belgraham, singing songs is not allowed in music class. At North, all choir and instrument groups are performing concerts with audiences. District-wide, family nights are not allowed at the elementary level, but at North, they are hosting indoor basketball, wrestling, water polo, volleyball, gymnastics, acting plays, choir, vocal jazz, orchestra, and band concerts for families to attend. The same pattern repeats for parent volunteers. At the high school, parents are volunteering at sporting events without proof of vaccination or negative COVID test required. But at the elementary level, parent volunteer programs have been removed completely. And to enter the building as a guest, you must provide COVID materials. There are more details on the chart for you to review outside the time I'm allowed. Since we are currently not at the same starting point across the district, it is impossible to effectively remove mitigations in layers. Sometimes we're not even at the same point within the same school. The message needs to be clear. This is not allowed in our schools because it's hindering our ability to equitably educate all D303 students. PE in classrooms and cafeterias is shortchanging those students while their peers are in gymnasiums using equipment in other schools. Not singing songs in music class for 7 months is Belgraham not fulfilling the curriculum this school board approved. What is the emotional effect that Coron students suffers from being assigned to sit alone at a lunch table every day? While at St. Charles North, all 2,022 students can sit where they want and with who they want. Is the fourth grader at Belgraham that can move if she puts on a mask better off than the first grader B at Norton Creek that always has to stay in a desk for indoor recess? You will never be able to pick these off one by one. There are just too many variations to each policy. I implore you, wipe the slate clean by issuing directive that all COVID mitigation stop now. Then indicate what, if any, you are directing to be in place currently and until when. Make it clear and make it make sense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Holly Gearhart.
Hi, my name is Holly Gearhart. I'm just following up on emails and some conversations that I've had over the last couple of weeks. And similar to what Elisa was saying about returning to normalcy at our school, the COVID mitigations are interfering with equitable education that's happening here at DO3. As she outlined, there's inconsistencies happening within our district and there are inconsistencies across the district. So where some people are saying their hands are tied because of the state mandates, we see other districts doing in-person elementary music sings with parents attending. We see field trips happening at other districts. None of those are happening right now. Like she brought up, even some schools within Bell or D303 aren't even singing in their music class. They're using percussion instruments and doing rhythm. 80 minutes a week, these students are not singing, taking away from instruction time that if all they're going to be doing is beating on xylophones and drums, that time could be better spent elsewhere. Like she said about the high school of able to host all these events. Our elementary schools are able to host outside events for scouts, for storm basketball, and even martial arts that wasn't even affiliated with the district was at Belgraham a couple weeks ago. There was cars lining the streets. There was hundreds of people there on the weekend. These events are happening at our schools. Why can't our own students benefit from these types of events? I know things are not equitable right now across the elementary schools or in some of the other schools. And I'm just asking to return to the pre-COVID levels that they had and then we can go about addressing consistencies across everything, but just trying to get back to where we were 2 years ago. 2 years we have been doing these things. 2 years we've been having our students have to go through extra hurdles that us adults have not gone through. The state mandate was lifted 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't masks are optional. Now everyone stays 3 feet apart, but yet our students are still expected to handle some of these mitigations that us adults do not have to do. I'm asking you to please rethink those. At least some of the easy ones we can do with the lunch seats, they could still be spaced, but let them choose their seats. Singing in music class, that should not be disallowed. That was never any type of state mandate. Indoor recess, we know rain's going to be coming with the spring. It is going to be an issue that we have to tackle. Again, having segregation in the classrooms for indoor recess is not something I think DU 303 stands for. These are just a few. I think we need to address these basic needs of ours before we can move on to addressing the academic issues that exist in our district, which I agree are bigger issues. But until some of our most basic needs of our students are met, where we feel like they belong, they feel safe and comfortable, then we can move on to then those bigger academic issues. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Megan Stacellbrat. Okay, it's close.
You guys need a podium here. It's like Com 101. Okay. So my name is Megan Stacellbrat. I have two kids, one at Bell Graham and one at Thompson. And I sincerely do appreciate everything that all of you do. I don't always agree with you, but I do appreciate your time. I've been an educator for 20 years, and I come from a family of educators and board members, so I recognize what you've all done. As we transition out of COVID restrictions, I want to make sure we don't miss the opportunity to support our kids' mental health. We have all been in some form of fight or flight for almost 2 years. And unless you've lived during the Spanish flu, you don't know what it's like to come out of a pandemic. So we're clearly aware of the academic gaps from COVID, but we also need to recognize the mental health gaps. Our kids' brains have been developing during a time of uncertainty and high anxiety. So we have the opportunity to teach our students skills and provide them with tools to process what they're feeling. For some students, it's a huge relief to not wear a mask anymore, but for some, it can be really scary. So in addition to helping our students process how they're feeling, we could look at, why is the person next to me feeling the way they're feeling? And we can teach them acceptance and empathy through all of this. So the obvious problem response is, how do we add another objective to our teachers' already completely full slate? Honestly, I recognize everyone is busy, but we also know that the teachers are sometimes the only source of mental health that our kids are going to get, the only source of mental health support. So I referred back to the SEL curriculum that I helped write, so I know it's good. 1A is about self-awareness and management, and 2A is how to recognize and predict the feelings and perspectives of others. So you could take an article from Newsella, Common Lit, ReadWorks, and write it from another person's perspective. You could read a social story, write a social story. You could have students watch the videos that are on the SEL website. And you could do something as simple as provide each teacher in the district with a quote to put on the board every day. And that quote, as students zone out, as we all zone out, they might read that quote and it might really help them. So I know our district is always very focused on test scores, which I get, we have to do that. But I would encourage you to just look at the bigger picture and focus first on mental health, because we all know we can't be academically successful if we're not healthy mentally, have good mental health. That's all. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to committee reports, learning and teaching, Mr. McNally, Mrs. McCabe.
All right, that's too close. Learning and teaching met on February 22nd. First item up was the early release update. Early release has been used at the elementary and middle school levels to build teacher and collective efficacy, and explained how additional early release would enhance, accelerate the curriculum implementation process. Some of the items that we discussed, Davis had a need to focus on foundational skills of phonemic awareness and phonics. SIP goal was to improve iReady overall and improve with phonemic awareness and phonics domains. Norton Creek data showed that their building needed to focus on perseverance and problem solving in math because teachers had extended time to learn, plan, and implement. Student learning increased, specifically percentage of fourth grade student achievement increased 21 percentage points from fall to winter. In the Access program, early release days have provided our certified staff with the opportunity to train our teaching assistants and on student-specific reports and evidence-based practices to inform the use of those tools. Next steps are to bring forward the following information to board members. How does D303 release time compare to other school districts? What is the loss of instructional time if we extend the amount of time for early release? Excuse me. What specifically does the when and where of early release look like, and what is the impact on our families? And how have D303 instructional minutes changed over the past 5 years? We're considering the decision to extend early release time to 120 minutes at elementary and middle schools by April to allow ample notice to families should we choose to do so. Board discussion included, do elementary schools focus on the same teacher learning during early release, or is it specific to each building? Does the structure of at the middle schools focus on content or teams? And there's only a semester worth of data. It would be beneficial to have a year's worth of data and then reevaluate to see what the needs are. Next up was a student achievement update, and that was the update of the L&T committee's goals and outcomes. K through 8 shows D303 students outperform national and state benchmarks in both achievement and growth. Grade levels are demonstrating high levels of growth in reading and math. We continue to see achievement gap widen for some groups, and we have groups that are not growing at a rate to meet grade level standards by the end of the year. Information provided an overview of how we are progressing toward our goals. Buildings are gaining a better understanding of the students they serve by leveraging iReady data alongside their classroom data, and we hope other metrics as well. Board discussion included some subgroups are not performing as well as other groups. How are we doing compared to other districts? Do some students fall into more than one subgroup? Can data be provided by building? Are we able to obtain information about other school districts from iReady and use that data to see what other districts are doing well? What defines a baseline, benchmark, and goal? What additional supports are we providing to schools? And is there anything we can do to help prepare our students for the open-ended questions on the IAR? Next up was the equity audit update, and Dr. Tracy Taylor provided an update in the equity audit process. The survey was emailed on February 7th. Survey closed on February 16th. It had been sent to families and students in grades 6 through 12. Survey was translated into multiple languages to make it inclusive for families and translated into Spanish to make it accessible to all staff. A paper copy was created for families that do not have an email listed. Response rates for the groups are between 18 and 50%. CEC, that is the company that is providing the audit, will develop the content, select, and lead the focus groups. An interest forum will be created for students in grades 6 through 12, families and staff by D303. The board requested that selection be random based on the various stratas to ensure all demographics are represented in a random fashion. Targeted data for focus groups is to begin in March. Targeted date for focus groups is to begin on March 14th, which would be today. Board discussion included, is the response rate concerning? Why aren't we reaching out to groups instead of sending a random interest form? And how are other schools seeking this information? There was no public comments, and our next meeting is going to be tomorrow. We had to move it up because of the other meetings that are occurring in our superintendent search. So we've rearranged some of our meeting dates. So we will be meeting tomorrow at 5:30 right here. And is Dr. Igo, are there any specific items for the agenda that you wanted to address, or? Okay. All right. And so I will just ask that, as I always do, people take a look at both the minutes of previous meetings and look at the agendas for the meetings upcoming, for not just this committee, but for all committees, to keep themselves informed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McNally. Business Services, Mrs. Fairgrave, Mr. Lackner.
Sure. So the Business Services Committee, we met on February 28th. From a standing agenda item standpoint, we talked about the Mid-Valley, the D303, financial reporting, and also financial impacts related to COVID. We also talked about an upcoming RFP, or request for proposal, related to banking services. Quite a bit of discussion surrounding the facility master plan update. And you may recall that's also a standing agenda item going forward for Business Services Committee. We also reviewed the night custodial contract renewal and an HVAC upgrade bid award, which I believe is on for action this evening. We reviewed the Thompson Middle School track resurfacing, our annual Chromebook purchase, and then security information and event management system, a projector replacement, and then finally had continuing discussion related to a possible intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Wayne. Our next meeting, just to note, that is a move as well. So that was moved to March 22nd at 5:30 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Policy.
Policy committee meeting took place on February 22nd. And there were three content areas that were really covered well. One was a policy update from the press system. There were about 35 different policies that the committee reviewed, and you'll see those changes in the consent agenda for today. If anyone should so desire, you can see each of those stunning policy updates that keep us in line with government requirements. In addition, we had a review of the policy 2.230, public participation at school board meetings. And there was a discussion about some of the proposals that were recommended from the Citizens Advisory Committee and the possibility of applying the rules that are outlined in policy 830, visitors to and conduct on school property, to the expectations of speakers during public comment. And the action that we took on that was to take that back to the district's legal counsel to understand what the implications of applying that policy to public comments would look like. At the same time, there were some revisions. And if there are no additional revisions, we'll bring those revised public participation guidelines back to the board for action. If there are significant revisions, we'll bring it back to policy for an additional conversation. We also had a discussion about the board agreements. Mrs. McCabe led a review of those agreements, including changes made but not implemented this summer, and a new version of those board agreements is on the agenda tonight for action. Following that discussion, we adjourned the meeting. Yeah, 45 minutes worked well.
Okay, thank you. DPTO.
I have the pleasure of sitting in on the DPTO meetings. We had one, and I don't have the date in front of me. It was mostly Dr. Pearson answering questions and the parents sharing what they are doing in terms of fundraising and needs for their building.
Okay, thank you. All right, that concludes our committee reports.
Mrs. Barker, would it be okay if I share a couple other?
Oh, yeah, it's about.
I had the opportunity this week to visit 3 elementary buildings to see the Empower classrooms, and I went to early childhood as well. As I know you all know, they love having board members come and see the work they're doing. They are recognized that people work full time and don't have that opportunity. But if you do get a chance, please do. I went to Fearson Creek, Bell Graham, and Munhall and saw a variety of grades. Each one was doing something a little bit different, but very creative, very skill based in terms of how to work together. It looks different in kindergarten than it does in 5th grade, but I think you would be impressed with what our teachers have been able to do. I also went to early childhood and observed the beginning of the afternoon. There's some issues with drop off, but the school has done a really wonderful job with parents in how to take a 3-year-old out of the car and be able to get them into the building. The problem is that it takes so long to put a 3-year-old into a car seat and buckle. You can't just park and it backs up around. But the director Ms. Marceau has been working with Mr. Baird and Mrs. Geyer, and I think they have done a tremendous job. So I did have, thanks to Mrs. Geyer for taking me around and having a chance to interact with kids and administrators as well. I also, just one more little thing, and I recognize that I'm retired and my schedule is flexible, so I have some opportunities to do things that I couldn't do very many years ago. IASB holds these webinars on books, and this was one called Crucial Conversations. It's an easy read. I enjoyed the conversation with board members across the state of Illinois, but if you're looking for something that could just help with calming, this is what I got from it, was how to calm down, how not to be emotional, how to remember to ask good questions so you can really connect with people who may have a different perspective than I do. So I highly recommend you get the book. It really won't take you long to read, and you will glean some good information from it. Thank you, Mrs. Barker.
Okay, thank you for that information. All right, let's move on to our discussion items. We have several. COVID-19 mitigation strategy. I had this on the agenda in case there was something more to discuss. Last week, the ISB weekly message went out, and there was a statement in there that they were in the process of updating guidance with IDPH. There has not been anything sent out that I'm aware of at this time to discuss. So at this point, I don't think there's anything else to say on this topic, except we did receive 2 citizens' comments about something that maybe we might want to have Dr. Pearson look into a little bit further. I know that some of the things that were put on, we have a nice table here from one of our citizens. Some of the things I'm looking at that are put on there, for example, the high school not having assigned tables and no restrictions. That's just true of high school. So some of these things may not be COVID mitigation based, but I'd like there to be some review of that and what is COVID mitigation based and not just a building based operations, that we look at those and kind of make sure that we're having the same thing at buildings that make sense for students and families.
I just, Mrs. Burke, I appreciate you raising that because I had also raised it privately with you last week. And I know Dr. Pearson, you and I have discussed it way in the past. So I'm hopeful. I'm hearing that after spring break, there are changes.
Yeah, so we are certainly looking forward to removing as many of the mitigation strategies as possible. We kind of set spring break as a target date. We know that there are a lot more events in the late spring that involve inviting people into the building. And so we want to try to be able to be as accommodating as possible. We are kind of just holding on a little bit just to see if there's any update or change in the ISB or IDPH guidelines. Like Mrs. Barker mentioned, we got like 3 sentences in the update last week that said, we're working on it. We'll get it to you as soon as possible. So, the first thing we wanted to do was make sure that as we remove the masks, that we were still able to provide a safe environment. I also think it's important to point out that there's a difference between what we would call extracurricular or public activities in our building, where people have choice about whether or not to attend, and what happens in our classrooms during the school day when students are present. Because we still have students that are masking. We still have students that are vulnerable or may have conditions that we're trying to protect them of. And so that's a little bit of a different setting than perhaps a basketball game or a concert or something where people are able to make decisions about whether or not to attend based on their level of comfort. So we are hoping to be able to just expand our options and availability after spring break.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the superintendent search process. We have this agenda item on so that HYA can review what's been accomplished so far and what we have left to do and answer any questions board members may have. Dr. Harris, would you like to walk us through this?
Dr. Harris, you're welcome to sit at one of the tables if you'd like and use one of those microphones, or if you can
I'm
stand
okay
up.
standing right
All
now,
right,
as long
great.
as it's not long period of time. It's all good. So I was asked to give a brief update. I'll certainly be willing to answer any questions any board member has about where we're at with the current progress. At the last meeting that Dr. McGee and I were here, we provided the leadership profile. We talked about all of the groups that we worked through in the community, over 30 focus groups, and they were some of them were open to the general public. Some of them were by invitation, for example, elected officials, right? City officials, park district officials, library board. I did one of those focus groups myself. That was, an invitation that the staff sent out to those particular people. But the bottom line on every single one of those, including the large public forums, we asked the same 6 questions to every single person. No matter what the situation, it's the same 6 questions that the board members had. So what you heard was exactly what went on in every conversation that we took place. And there were some that were well attended, some were not. It really was sporadic, as we shared before. The good thing is you set out a timeline. I want to commend the board for that, and we are right on track. Tonight we'll be talking with you later this evening about the candidate pool, and you have some tough decisions to make, and we'll be going through that as well. And I know you've got meetings set up in the very near future to complete the interview process and hopefully appoint a new superintendent right on schedule in April. If there are specific questions about any of the details of the process, more than happy to answer it. I also would just like to say I'd like to commend the staff. I know they send out many communications and reminders and all types. It was all posted on the website. I was watching it carefully, to see what was happening, to make sure that we did not have anybody that said they were not allowed to participate. I shared my email and phone number to anybody who showed up, and actually did have some follow-ups, which was good. And I know Dr. McGee did as well. So hopefully that address, the request. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Dr. Harris at this time? Okay, thank you, and
All
we'll
right.
see you later.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, and that brings us to our last for discussion item, and that is senior leadership team hiring. And we have this on the agenda due to the fact that we have several senior leadership team members who are leaving the district or retiring. And several board members have expressed the desire to discuss what a board's level of involvement should be in the hiring process.
I think in light of the fact that we have a superintendent search ongoing and some important roles to fill, we may have a steady state role to play after the transition period of a new superintendent. We may also, as a board, have a role to play during the course of that transition. And so one of the things I think that's important for us to talk about is, given those vacancies that you reference, what's the board's role during the portion of time between now and the time we have the next superintendent in place, versus what the role of the board might be at a more steady state when that superintendent can provide his or her input into the process in a different way than what we have today. So I think those two conditions probably warrant a little different conversation for both. I know some districts have board committees associated with HR and a more formal set of policies and procedures associated with the board's role in senior leadership team hiring. And so it might be worth exploring what this board would like to do, or if the process that we've used traditionally remains in place, which is a little more ad hoc, with some board members interviewing folks like, say, the CFO candidates and not other SLTs. One thing I think that we ought to really consider is codifying the board's role so that there's some clarity and having some conversation about that.
I think as we look at some of those senior leadership positions, have they all been posted? Have they talked to us about where we're at with that process?
Yeah, so 2 of the positions that are open are director or executive director positions. So one is the executive director of Student Services or of Instructional Interventions. And the other one is the Executive Director of Elementary School. Those positions have actually been screened and interviewed for, and we'll have an update for you on those in closed session this evening. For the other two assistant superintendent positions, they've just been posted. So the operations position is posted, and there are currently, I was just checking, it looks like there are 27 applicants and there are 10 more who have not completed their application for the operations assistant superintendent position. The HR position was just posted on Friday, and we currently have 9 applicants for that position so far. It has been posted. I think, traditionally with senior leadership positions, there is a district level interview. And then there is a stakeholder team-based interview that happens where we have representative stakeholders from either teachers or, representatives from the union or association, principals, building level administrators. It just depends on the role and kind of what area they supervise to be, how inclusive that is. We've typically used a 2-panel interview process. So there are 2 panels of mixed stakeholders, and then they switch and interview with the opposite group so that every candidate has an interview with each of the panels. And then those panels provide basically feedback for consideration, kind of the pluses and minuses, or the pros and cons of that particular candidate for the position. That's what we've used historically. We have included board members in the past on those panel interviews, depending on the role. So like, for example, for CFO, because that person serves as the treasurer of the board, that we've had members of the Business Services Committee, I think was the last time we did it, served on those interview committees. And we also have done the same thing with communications, because that person is so involved with supporting the board with communication. So it has been a practice in the past. I think one of the pieces that's so critical is that no matter who's sitting in the superintendent's chair, the senior leadership team is the superintendent's team. It's their kind of cabinet. And they certainly need to have a voice in the selection of that team. They're responsible for their work, and they need to make sure that the team is cohesive, and that the strengths of each individual member of the team actually complement each other in such a way that they really form a nice team. So that makes it a little challenging. I feel like the process that we use to screen applicants at the district level, which looks at leadership characteristics and is really a strong process. And what we were thinking initially was that we would walk through that screening process with candidates so that when the new superintendent is named, they could be involved on the backside with either interviewing, either with the team interviews or individually with the final candidates to make a determination and recommendation to the board. But I think no matter what, since we're so close to the time that you're going to name a superintendent, that we should try, because we've got spring break. We really have 2 weeks spring break, and then you're going to try to name someone at the April board meeting. Looking at the candidate list right now, I think we would be okay waiting until that time, at least to get for the superintendent, whoever's named, to have an opportunity to weigh in on the finalists. So that would be my recommendation to you right now. And then if you as board members would like to be included in that kind of panel interview process, you're going to be doing a lot of interviewing, but we certainly would be happy to maybe have a representative on the panels like we've done in the past, if you feel like that would be helpful as well for continuity.
I just have a clarifying question. Have any changes been made to either of the postings, job descriptions, requirements, et cetera, for either of the assistant superintendents?
So no, they're really similar to what they used to be, except for the HR position, which is it's human resources and administrative services. Now that Ms. Christensen is here with us and has taken some of the responsibilities from what that role looked like previously, the way the job description was described was we emphasized the HR responsibilities because we realized that that's really a big chunk of that role. And then, of course, the policy and those pieces that Mr. Moore currently conducts. And the operations job is huge. So there's just so many pieces to that. So that job description stayed the same.
First of all, I want to say to those of the senior leadership who are leaving, we are grateful to all the work that you have done to support our kids and our teachers in our building, and you will not be easily replaced. So our best to all of you who are moving on. You will be missed. I like the idea of letting our new superintendent make the final decisions. I do not believe it's the board's role to hire senior leadership. I have felt that way for a long time because our job as a board is to hire a superintendent who will then do the other hirings. I believe that if we were unable to find a superintendent and we had an interim, I would be willing to come back and reflect on that. But at this point in time for me, I think we need to send a clear message to any candidate who's coming and to our senior leadership that this is going to be the role of the superintendent. If we were invited to sit on panels, I would, I'll be frank, I don't know that people have time to do that, and to be held up by a board member who doesn't have time, that is unfair. I also think there's an expertise that needs to be considered. Having had 35 years of being an educator, I would not claim to be an expertise in HR, and I've negotiated multiple contracts, but I haven't been in the work for some time now, and things change. So I don't feel comfortable in saying that any of us have the expertise to go and be part of an interview to make that decision. I think it does rest with the experts that we've hired that are already in our in our operation. That's where I stand. So I would not be in favor of us having being involved in the hiring practice right now.
My take, I absolutely appreciate and I support the timing. And I would want to have our future superintendent, once named, I think that individual should be part of the final selection process, absolutely. But I also am cognizant of the fact that I feel we're in a state of transition for obvious reasons as a district. And that's where I do have a little bit of a different view, in that I think that there is value during this transition period to have some board engagement on the key senior leader roles. So that's my thought.
I was just going to say, I agree with our new superintendent having the opportunity to, interview the finalists. I think we all would agree to that. But I do think that given there's two different things. There's the piece where we talk about future forward with a new superintendent and being part of the, hiring process. I think we have to wait and talk about that in the future. But I do think right now, given that several of the people that we would have selecting some of these other positions are leaving the district and or retiring, I think it's important that we do have a higher level of involvement than we typically would. I do agree there's some time constraints, so we would have to choose our person who would maybe be doing that work carefully so that they could be available. But that's just my thinking at this time.
I'm going to jump in and kind of sort of echo that. I think timing is everything. And I think certainly in a different situation where we didn't have a superintendent position in flux as well as two major leadership roles, we would want that superintendent to ultimately be the person that was really pretty much bringing someone to us. But we're not in that normal time. So I think there's going to have to be for a couple of reasons. One, simply because there's not going to be somebody in that role to do that. But second, I don't want to have, we have, what did we say, 27 applicants plus 10 in process for one position and 9 applicants so far for another. I don't want any quality applicant to kind of slip through our fingers because we weren't ready to make a decision. So I think we do need to kind of get the process started and give people an idea, people who are applying, an idea of what direction we're going. So I think that's an important thing. So I guess I'm kind of echoing some of the sentiments that have been stated already. The one other thing, though, is I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we are also losing 20 some, I don't know how many years of institutional history and knowledge between the two senior leaders who are leaving, who have both done a fine job while they've been here. So
Mrs. Smith just said the number 68 years of institutional knowledge.
Well, I guess I was talking about the two, but you're right. I'm completely remiss then, because I did leave out a couple other people. Thank you for the number. So we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge and history from people who have done, and I apologize to those I left off. But we're losing a lot of that history and knowledge that I think is important. And so I think in doing that, as Mrs. Fairgrieve mentioned, we are in a big transition time here. So I think we don't want to lose out on quality candidates. So I guess that's it.
I would agree that I think the superintendent that is coming on board needs to have review and have part of the decision be their own, because it is their cabinet, so to speak. I don't feel comfortable with the board always doing these kinds of things, but to all of our points, this is a unique time. So that's something I would feel more comfortable with, because it's such a unique time and we're replacing so many large leadership roles. But I wouldn't want to set a precedent where the board is hiring SLT as a pattern, senior leadership, because I just don't feel that that's the board's role. Just for now, I understand that there's a lot of decisions to be made, and it definitely is going to be a timing issue. So if that's something where a board member needs to sit in, I'm certainly happy to be part of that in some way. But I think it should be more in a manner of a participant as opposed to the person leading the charge for the decision.
I may have missed this, but what is the anticipated time frame to fill those positions? Do we have a date set that is ideal to have them filled?
I think reasonably you would want to have this person named. I mean, we're in the hiring window right now. But for these positions, as long as we had somebody hopefully by the May board meeting, I think that would be reasonable, given the fact that you're hoping to name a superintendent at the April board meeting. That would give us a month to do final interviews and have a candidate or candidates to present at the May board meeting. I have seen assistant soups be named as late as June, but that's getting late.
I'd just like to add one more thing to consider. The transition is really critical, but it is with the superintendent. And I'm concerned that if the board gets involved in the hiring of that team, we have taken away a considerable part of the work that new superintendent will do with transition. I agree wholeheartedly with Mrs. Bell. This is not our job, and I would not want to set a precedent. I hear what people are saying, but I firmly believe this is the new superintendent's responsibility, and we're in a time that we can allow that. If they don't like the candidates, they can start over, or they may know some candidate. That's part of the conversation we have with that new superintendent, rather than us coming and saying, here's your person, good luck, have fun, which of course they would. But I think that's the piece that we have to consider. What is our role and what kind of message are we sending to the team if we are doing the hiring?
I haven't, just to clarify though, unless I missed something somewhere, I haven't heard that from anyone yet that the board would be doing the hiring. I think there's a view that the board can be more participatory than it has in the past. And at least from my standpoint, again, I completely agree with what Dr. Pearson had stated. We do have an opportunity if we keep on the timeline. We do have an opportunity to have our new superintendent directly involved, and I think we should. I think we should do so.
My perception of what I was offering to do would be part of the process, not a decision maker, just a part of the process, bringing candidates for a decision to be made by the superintendent. I am not comfortable, unless it was an emergency situation, having the board do that, because that's just seems to not be our role as a president.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing, and then we'll just kind of go around and maybe do a straw poll here. I think what I'm hearing is that we're all in agreement that to stay at the timeline, continue the process. The new superintendent will be involved with the finalists, and that board members, several board members would like to have some participation from a board member, and definitely not be a decision maker in that manner, unless there was something.
Then could we make it really, before I can settle on that, I want to know what the board members believe their role is on the panel and who would do that and why.
So I can speak to from my prior experience. My role was to be part of the interview process, and I also provided feedback to ultimately to Dr. Pearson, who made that decision. So I provided, positives and other, observations as well.
I think that level of participation is quite reasonable. And given the articulation of why the CFO role and business services were linked, given the CFO's role as treasurer for the board, I think is an important observation. I think as well, the idea of having particular committee members offer that same counsel, recognizing that the recommendation for a hire comes from the superintendent, even in this transition period, I think would be an appropriate posture. It's not as if we would want the board to make the final recommendation on an individual candidate, but simply to offer feedback to the superintendent about that short list or whomever they might have interviewed. So I think the way that you describe the role would be consistent with the way that I would view, even in this period, the board's participation in any of those roles.
Yeah, I think it's actually entirely likely that whomever is sat in this position is probably going to have some people in mind as well, maybe some colleagues that they've worked with. So they would likely be bringing additional individuals into the fold. I agree with several of you that we build the candidate pool, help along that process. So there are, is a robust list of individuals that they can select from. With respect to your question regarding experience in this area, I'm not even necessarily throwing my head in the ring, but I did run talent management for a large organization, lots of hiring and selection for high level positions. So I'm happy to sit on a panel. I agree we should not be spearheading this process. I think that should be done by he or she who sits in this position in the future. But given the weird circumstances that we're in and the timing that we're in, I think it's possible that we may have a little bit more input than we generally would.
Okay, as I was thinking about this particular, I think it would make sense for the same thing. It's participation. It's not even necessarily asking questions as part of the panel, but really just kind of observing, providing this new superintendent feedback. It would make sense to me that the human resource position, someone from policy would be sitting there just observing and providing the feedback to the new superintendent. It would make sense that operations would be business service, someone from business services, sitting, listening, providing feedback. Is that in line with everyone's thinking?
I think it's something that certainly those are considerations, but I think it's something that should be open to really any board member that would consider themselves. I think it's something we should all be considered, because I think that a lot of times we're not necessarily put on a committee because we have the expertise in hiring people in that particular field. So I think it's something that all board members there should be consideration for all board members. For my own part, I don't know. As Mrs. McCabe has pointed out, I don't know if I would have the time myself to do it. So I think it's something that all board members should be considered for possibly filling that role.
I mean, if this is the direction sounds like for the most part, we're supportive of. I mean, is that something you want to take away and then just talk to individual board members and their interest?
Yes, if we could do just a quick straw poll that we're on board with having a board member sit in on those interviews, then I'll take that, and I'll just kind of talk to individual board members that have provided an interest this evening, as well as kind of open it up to anybody to give me a call. Mr. Kuchar.
Yes, I'm good with that.
Okay. Mr. Lechner. Yes. Okay. See, no, I got one no, all other yeses. So I think we'll kind of move forward in this direction, and then, of course, then if you can kind of give that direction to those that are, moving this process along, that'd be great. Okay. That brings us to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anyone want to pull an item from the consent agenda at this time? No. Okay, Ms. Marsan, please call roll.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchar,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Barker.
Abstain. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to our 4 action items. The first one is board agreements. Do I have a motion to approve the board agreements?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, do we have discussion on it? No? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please call roll?
Mr. Kuchar,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
No.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, we have a resolution to release non-tenured licensed employees other than the final year probationary licensed employees. So I'm going to read a specific statement. Do I have a motion that this Board of Education adopt the resolution before you, authorizing and directing the president and secretary to give the non-tenured licensed employees other than the final year probationary licensed employees listed on Exhibit 1 attached hereto written notice of this board's decision not to reemploy said licensed employees for the 2022-23 school year, and in view of the fact that the resolution form in front of you is the same for those non-tenured licensed employees other than the final year probationary licensed employees. I recommend we adopt this like resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there a request that this resolution be read in its entirety? Okay. Is there a request that any individual resolution be read in its entirety?
I just have a request for a little bit of clarity regarding this process. I'm admittedly ignorant to how this all works. And so if someone could just explain a little bit more regarding how this process works, is this kind of standard operating procedure? Are these people aware of this? Can you expand, please?
Happy to. So state law sets out employment for teachers very clearly. All of the people on the list tonight are either people who were hired on temporary contracts, so they were informed at the time of hire that this would be their 1 year of guaranteed work, or they're on the list because of performance concerns by their principal or other supervisor. Statute requires boards to take this action no sooner or no later than 45 calendar days before the last day of school, which puts April board meeting just a little bit too late. So that's why we do it in March. yes, the people on the list are aware of this, either because they were hired this way or because of performance in which they've already met with their principals. And they were, the ones on temporaries were reminded of that fact within the last month or so. It doesn't prevent them from being rehired. And some people on this list, I would expect, will be rehired. That happens every year, but we can't wait any longer because of the statutory timelines.
Is there a way for us to determine which are performance-based and which are just contract-based?
We can discuss that in closed session if you would like.
They want you to disclose it here. I just didn't know if there was a differentiation on the list.
There's not.
Any other questions? Okay, then we'll move forward. Ms. Marcy, on the roll, please.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Abstain.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes, motion passes. Okay, item C, resolution to honorably dismiss selected non-licensed employees at the close of the current school term. I will read the specific resolution. Do I have a motion that this Board of Education adopt the resolution before you, authorizing and directing the president and secretary to give the selected non-licensed employees listed on Exhibit 1 attached hereto written notice of this board's decision to honorably dismiss said personnel effective as of the end of the 2021-22 school term, and in view of the fact that the resolution form in front of you is the same for these selected non-licensed employees, I recommend we adopt this like resolution. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there a request this resolution be read in its entirety? No? Okay. Is there a request that any individual resolution be read in their entirety? No? Okay. Is there any other discussion? No? Okay. Ms. Marcy, on the roll, please.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Abstain.
Mr. Lackner,
Abstain.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes. Motion passes. Okay. Item D, multi-site HVAC upgrade bid award. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have discussion? Okay, no. Ms. Marcy, on the roll, please.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes, motion passes. All right, that brings us to item E, Village of Wayne Intergovernmental Agreement. So we are going to move this item back to committee. It appears that there are additional questions that need answers, and item E will be moved back to committee. That brings us to for information. We have 6 reports for information tonight, and then 1 appointment. I want to call to your attention the D303 January 31st financial report, the Mid-Valley January 31st financial report, the FOIA requests, the district enrollment, and the COVID-19 summary, as well as the natural gas agreement. And that brings us to the appointment of Policy Committee Co-Chair. Mr. Lackner has agreed to step back from policy. And we appreciate the work that you've done thus far on it. And Mr. Kuschert will take over as the new Policy Co-Chair. Congrats. Okay. We have no new business listed on tonight's agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add or see added at a later date? Thank you. No? Okay, not at this time. We do have end of the meeting citizen comments. Mrs. McCabe, would you please read our policy?
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 15 minutes at the end of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Okay. Max Gordon, please.
Greetings. I have no handout tonight. I just wanted to reiterate what the two ladies talked about. That's important to them. I don't want you to dismiss that, that they're not getting a clear message on what each school is up to. That's why somebody put the work on the chart. I didn't create this, of course she did. And I think we have to honor that. The fact that you may come out with, you're waiting till, sounds like the spring break to give a definitive answer. I after listening to you, I understand some of the sensibility of that for me is you don't know if that was COVID was going to change that. That's my guess. But I wouldn't dismiss what they're experiencing, and they just want clarity. That's all. Clarity. It should be consistent across all schools. I should be able to go into any school, so I support that. My focus remains the same. To the challenge to challenge and lift the academic performance at every school. And the mitigation lack of clarity for the district gets in the way of that focus. That's what gets in my way. Therefore, what is the current policy parents can expect? You've talked about that. It sounds like that's going to be coming. And that's very short. I said, restore all the freedoms lost to students and parents, be quick and decisive so we can get on to the academic improvement, which is considered good. I agree and further suggest the need for a big goal to propel us forward and engage the imagination of everyone, students, parents, teachers, and administrative leaders. I think a goal, you've got a lot on your plate, my God. I have a friend that I was talking with on the way. He's trying to get his mother and his sister out of Ukraine into Poland, and they hope to get on a bus tomorrow. They went to the bus today. They wouldn't take him because that bus wouldn't take the dog. They had a little bitty dog. So that's a different reality. So our reality, why we may feel overwhelmed, I'm taking all of this over that any day. So I say Slava Ukraini, that's glory to Ukraine. Those people are fighting for their freedom, and that touches me. So a big goal for me is 7 words and 8 numbers. St. Charles, best public school in Illinois, 2026, 2027. That's 5 years. Best public school in Illinois, 2026, 2027. It's doable. It's possible. So I want to help you get there. I hope you want my help to help you get there. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to, do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purposes of litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has not been filed and is pending before court or an administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds an action is probable or imminent, or in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. The appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers to the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in that's not part of that. And then also collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks for staying with me on that. Ms. Marcy on the roll, please.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes, motion passes. Board moves to closed session.